here. Yeah, great.
Whoa, this ain't going.
See down the side. And
but I appreciate everybody on the chat tonight for your comments. Well, hello, folks. We'd like to welcome everybody to the V Connection. I'm here with Spanky and Tom and Melissa, and we have Lee hiding in the background. So there he is, folks. So I think today we're going to try to talk a little bit more about getting your bees set up and ready for spring. I feel like it's every year I'm always behind, and I have my goals set for what I want to do. And if I'm not getting started now, I won't get finished in the end of the season what I want. So, but before we start that, let's just go around the room, check out the weather, what's going on in different parts of the nation. Tom and Melissa are out in Missouri. So, Tom, what's going on in your area, brother?
Well, it's been a little bit kind of like a typical Missouri weather, I would say, in the spring is a little bit of flip-flopping temperatures. Yeah. So we were really warm last week. And even at the beginning of this week, Monday and Tuesday, were pretty warm.
We had 80 degrees like on Tuesday.
I believe it was. It was actually pretty warm, yeah. So, you know.
And then it was 40 on Wednesday. So.
Yeah, it dropped off and got a little bit chilly. And then so our overnight lows have been running them in the probably mid-20s or so, which is a little bit cool. But it bounces back pretty quickly. Like today turned out to be a pretty nice day. It was somewhere in the 50s, I think, which was pretty reasonable. So, you know, typical spring here in St. Louis, Missouri, just kind of all over the place. But it looks like tonight we'll get a little bit of another cold snap and possibly a little bit of rain. And they're talking about borderline temperatures at freezing. We might see a few snowflakes. Maybe some elevated areas might see some really light accumulation. So we'll see how that works out.
And then Saturday it's supposed to be back to like 70 degrees.
Yeah.
So fun times.
Typical Missouri weather. It's just, that's all I can say. I guess probably most of the Midwest kind of does that, flip-flops around a little bit.
Yeah.
So,
So Spanky, what's going on off the mountain, brother?
It was warm. It's currently 42. The other night it was in the 60s. Been rainy and cloudy. So I'm assuming it's going to get back into that rhythm of 60s, 30s, 60, 30s.
Yeah. Yeah, up here on top of the mountain, it's been running, you know, almost into the 60s and then down into the 30s, you know, low 30s at night. So better always back down to freezing. But I think tonight they said something about some freezing rain coming in for us up here on top of the mountain. So, you know, it just don't seem to be able to get rid of it. And then it looks like our maple trees are about to pop. We're getting some pollen coming in from the maples right now. So that surprises me because I don't know what maples are actually blooming, but I don't see many of them. So that's a surprise. So.
Yeah, there's pollen here coming in. I watched the bees. We's out there started baiting the boxes the other week because, you know, if they're bringing in pollen, they're going to start brood rearing, and then they're going to be thinking about swarming.
Already. So what about you, Lee, man? What's going on down there?
Yeah, we're getting a little cool weather again, or cool for us. We were yesterday or the day before we hit like 81, And now today we got a wind blowing in, and we had a high of like 58, and we're still at 57 right now. Now, come the weekend, we're going to be back mid 70s again, and it'll warm up for us next week. The only thing that I really see growing around here right now, we're starting to get, I believe it's a little bit of bitterweed in the ditches, and the Bradford pears are starting to bloom out pretty good. And once the Bradford pears start blooming out here, the bees really don't mess with them that much. But I find that's when they're bringing enough pollen in off of some other plants, and we start getting ready for swarm season.
Yeah, I tell you, it's the season. I think is going to pop really quick, especially around here. I just have a feeling that nothing seems to want to be held back, and it's wanting to go very quickly. So I just hope that we don't get that late April, spring freeze that we always get every year that kills everything. Man, that just kills
It's
them.
March here, then it hits. It kills out
According
all.
to the Farmer's Almanac, I don't think we're supposed to get one this year, from what I'm seeing.
Well, I hope not.
It kills out all the peach blooms.
Yeah. So, Tom, talk to me a little bit about your setup and what you've got in mind for your all's goals, and how you're getting it set up right now to achieve those goals. And after we kind of go around the room here, we're going to open this up for a live chat.
Yeah. So for the most part, I'm going to say we're kind of doing things very similar to what we had done last year. So far, so I'll start with saying so far, it looks like that I'm right at about a 19 to 20% loss for wintering. Now, again, things can change a little bit, of course, but of the remaining 80% that I had going into winter, they're all looking actually really strong. So what we generally do in the springtime is we'll start to give them a little bit of a pollen patty. Now, I'm going to start by saying there too, Missouri is a very, very rich when it comes to pollen. We generally don't have an issue with pollen. I would say our nectar and our honey flows are, I would say mediocre compared to some places. They're not bad. But the way that I use pollen, or the way we use pollen, is I don't really try to prematurely put pollen out before anything around here is starting to release a little pollen. I wait till I start to see, and for us, it's probably similar to you guys a little bit, where we get elm, maple, there's a little bit of witch hazel that's out there, and then willow. Those are kind of our first hits of pollen, and I would say they're probably about maybe 10-ish or so days, maybe a little bit earlier this year. So I wait till I start to see a little bit on the legs, and not even, it doesn't have to be a lot. We'll go out there and throw a pollen patty on. Now, this year we didn't make any of our own pollen patties. We had purchased the pollen patties that were from the Nabi with the 4%.
Are they the global patties?
Yeah, they were the global patties that had 4% pollen in them. And I thought, you know what, let's just try them. They were offering a pretty good deal on those. So we bought, I don't remember how many, maybe 150 pounds, knowing that I could feed at least a pound plus to each one of them. So what I usually do is, if it's a really strong cluster, I'll go ahead and just give them a half of that patty for right now. Because my idea is that I want them to be able to eat it within about 7 to 10 days. That way I'm not trying to populate my hives with hive beetles and larvae and things of that nature, kind of the unwanted, right? So, and then I can come back in 7 to 14 days and maybe give them a little bit more. On the smaller colonies, I may give them like a third of a pollen patty. So, it's just a third of a pound. And so really all I'm trying to do there is, I know I've got good pollen coming in, but on those days where we have those cold snaps, like right now, where we get some of those rainy days, and sometimes those can last to 2 or 3 days, I'm just trying to bridge those gaps. That's really my goal in mind when I do that. So I'm not really trying to go out there and just keep dumping a bunch of pollen on. I personally don't think that where I'm at, it's completely necessary to do that, but that's just my own thought. One thing that we did a little bit different this year actually is, generally I'll have some type of a fondant or a, more of a dry type feed, a candy board on there. We didn't make any candy boards. I used a Hive Alive fondant patty, and some of them got a second one. But I didn't want to keep feeding them that because it's kind of a little pricier. So what I did do is, talking to a couple local guys around here, they changed my mind a little bit in some ways. I didn't do it while it was extremely cold, but when it started to come out of the cold snaps, I actually mixed up. I guess it was probably a couple 100 gallons of a 1-to-1 sugar feed, and I put them on there about, was it last week?
Last week.
Last week I finished feeding everybody. So every colony, if it was a strong cluster, I gave them 2 gallons. On the weaker ones, I give them maybe 3/4 to 1 gallon on there. And I'll tell you, a couple of those hives, when I went and checked them today, almost had it completely emptied out, and they were still working it. And this is this earlier today when it was probably in the upper 40s, but the sun was shining. So it wasn't even what I would consider warm, because it was a little bit breezy and they really weren't even flying a lot. So I was able to do some dirt work and stuff around some of the hives. I've set up a new hive stand in one location and I'm going to reconfigure a few things. So I was making things a little bit easier for us in one of the bee yards. And yeah, right now we're just kind of seeing the beginning stages. Again, a little feed, a little bit of pollen, and starting to set a few things up. So right now, that's kind of what we're seeing, and what my initial springtime goals are right now.
What about you, Spanky? What's your goals for the season?
Well, I'm going to try to keep them from flying away. I don't know. I was thinking about splitting. I'm not sure how I want to do that because I don't have a bunch of extra comb. So it's whatever they've got. So it's kind of, I'm trying to figure out how I want to do that. Other than that, I need to get some more bee hotels for my solitary bees. They plug them all up. So I gotta get some more of those.
So, Spanky, are you going to stay with them as many colonies that you have now, or did you want to get a few more colonies?
I mean, I'm fine getting up. Normally I have a hard time getting the queens back, so it tends to correct itself to whatever it wants to be.
Well, I tell you what, Spanky, just talking about what you're talking about, and I suggest this for anybody that's probably where I'm at right now. I'm at my 5th year, and I started this last year. I had one colony, and the only thing I wanted this one colony to do was build wax. All I wanted them to do. I'm going to put feed on them, and I'm absolutely just going to let them build wax all season long. I feel like it'll save me for my supers that I want to have drawed out for them to be ready. I want to get up to probably about 75 hives. I've got about 32 right now. So we lost about 4 or 5 over winter. But for the most part, I really want to narrow it down to having this colony to produce comb. And then on the side of that, I want to do a lot of queen rearing also this year. So that's going to be tough. I'm kind of, be honest with you, I'm kind of breaking myself apart in many different segments. And that this may be a mistake on my part. And you guys in the chat, let me know if this is a mistake. And I want to have some colonies to produce a lot of honey. I did some single brood management last year, and that seemed to work out very well. I got heavy production in the honey colonies, and I was able to move some of these colonies to the sourwood. So that's my game plan, is to really move about 10 or 15 colonies around, make them super strong, single brood management, and let them just produce honey. I'm going to use the small colony to produce comb that I need for those supers, for those colonies. And then, make some queens, maybe sell a few nukes. So I'm kind of a little bit everywhere. It's probably a little too much, especially building some hives on the side. But I'm really going to try to give it a shot and see if it doesn't work out a little bit better for me. That's my game plan. I hope that works, and we'll see. And I'll let you know if it fails. It could definitely fail. And I have failed in the past. I think it was about 2 years ago. I failed my goals for the season, and I just didn't get them started early enough. Last year, I got them started too early. So there's a fine line of getting these bees ready to produce what you want them to do. So what about you, Lee, man?
Well, what's going to help you out with that, though? You're full time there now, ain't you?
Well, I hope to be.
So, I mean, more time, you'll be able to take care of all them extra things that you want to do too,
Right.
instead of having to worry about a regular work. And that's part of my goal. I'm hoping, depending on how everything works out, maybe I'll be working a little bit less this year at my regular job and be able to get in the bees more, but that's yet to be seen. I'm just still trying to get everything moved back to my home yard. That way, when I do get off, I have time to do everything right here at home rather than visiting 4 different locations. So I have got a few more of them moved here, but I still got some more left to move.
Right. So you going to stay at the same amount of colonies you got left? You going to go up a little bit, or what's your game plan with that?
Right now, I think I'm just going to try to stay between 25 and 30 at the moment.
Okay.
Now, does that always work out? No. I mean, sometimes we just got to make a split, but hey, if I hear somebody in the area that's looking for some bees and I need a split that needs to be made, I can sell that off as a nuke versus bringing in another hive there and having more work.
Yeah, I get a lot of swarm calls, and if I know somebody that's in need, and sometimes it's a new beekeeper, and this is great, you can take that swarm and give it to another beekeeper if you just don't want to build your apiary and make it huge, right? And help somebody else out if you can. So I think did somebody have a question for Tom and Melissa there, lead man? On back up. You started a while ago.
Oh, I think it was
Brian.
Yeah. So I answered it in the chat. It's just nothing, no real new product goals. We got that creamer from Hilco at Nabi, and is it still boxed?
No,
it's unboxed.
I unboxed it and cleaned it. And
whenever I seen that, I didn't know if he was talking about like purchasing products for gold this year or making new products.
New products. No, we just need to get that creamer going. I mean, I have creamed honey already. It's just not in.
Yeah,
it's just not in the creamer yet. And then we want to get another batch of that bourbon barrel honey going. As far as
I'd like to do 2 batches.
Well, yeah, we want to keep going, but as far as equipment, I mean, we blew our purchase budget at Nabi. I mean,
you get some extra stuff at the Missouri conference, perhaps.
Yeah, let me think. So if I remember correctly, Ricky, thank you for bringing that up. I think we made a couple purchases there.
Oh no, hold on. We got a diagnostic thing popped up. Go ahead.
Well, I think Melissa made a couple purchases there, if I remember correctly. I think
yes, she did. You're right.
Yeah, yeah. You remember that, don't you, Ricky?
Yeah, I do remember. She took all your money that you got from the honey, right? And then dropped it over there, didn't she?
She did. And honestly, that night, I don't know why she didn't give you your cut. I mean, you sold that bourbon barrel, and I mean, she just left you hanging. So honestly, the next time I see you, we owe you. That's just all there is to it. So.
No, somebody else, which I knew he was at least going to purchase one thing. I was not expecting 3 purchases. 3, Ricky.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know about 3. Oh wow.
He purchased the bottle filler, the honey pump.
That's right.
And
the clarifier.
The clarifier, yeah.
So I got that stuff from John. I was planning on making 2 purchases. She thought 1.
So we did 3.
And then John basically, I held out to the end of the day, and John kept pushing me, and I kept hee-hawing around, and he kind of made me a deal that I couldn't refuse on the speed fill. So I've been talking to a gentleman here, actually one of the guys that was the speaker, Jim Masucci. And he's got a very similar setup as far as honey extraction going. So him and I have kind of been talking back and forth, and he told me a couple of ideas and goals that he had with a couple of, I am going to use basically the Lysin automatic uncapper that will flow down into the clarifier, as well as, yeah, John is good at that. You're absolutely right.
He already knew what he was. John didn't need to talk him into anything. He already knew what he was going to buy. Don't let him fib
Look,
to you.
Brian here says won't regret the speed fill. I don't think that I will either, Brian. All this are good quality purchases. They weren't just spur of the moment. I was thinking these things through.
Here, hold on 1 second. I want to answer this question real quick, and then you can.
Well,
So Benjamin asked how much a barrel cost. Yeah. We actually didn't purchase the barrel that we use. A local bourbon shop did like a swap with us. Like they gave us a barrel, we put our honey in it, and they just wanted it back because they were going to put bourbon back in it.
Right.
To actually purchase a barrel, they're going to run between $125 to $189 is what I'm finding. So they're not cheap.
Now, so in other words, y'all wanting bourbon infused honey, they're wanting honey infused bourbon.
Right. Correct.
Yes.
So go back to what we got from John Hill.
Yeah. So the clarifier. So my extractor and my license on capper will both go into the clarifier, and then what my goal is, as it gets to the end, it'll help maybe strain some of the heavy particulates, wax, and things like that out. And then when I get to the end, I'm going to actually use the honey pump that I bought from John to pump it from there. Probably, I haven't fully figured this part out and kind of hee-hawing around a little bit, but probably into a couple of larger settling tanks. Lyson has a couple of 50-gallon settling tanks that are actually really cost-effective. And I'm not going to make any of these purchases right now because I want to kind of think this thing through a little bit more.
Because he's purchased enough already.
And
he's making it easier on you, Melissa, because they get to spend more time with him because it's so much faster.
You know, I mean, I only have so much time, you know, when it comes to my season and stuff, you know, I have to make this, you know, working smarter, not harder, like somebody said, you know.
So tell everybody what you're trying to do, what you were talking to me about with the speed fill, how you want to kind of hook it to each bottle. Maybe somebody else has an idea.
So if anybody in the watching here has any ideas that does have a speed fill, I'm really open. I mean, I'm completely all ears. My thought was this. So we keep 3 bottling tanks. I have one for a darker honey. I would call it more like, not really dark, but for us, amber, kind of a medium dark amber. And then we have a light honey. And then we also have our bourbon barrel aged. So we have 3 tanks. What my thought is I was thinking about taking the speed fill and then piping both of the tanks into it, but using a very, very short section of tubing or pipe in between, where I can kind of switch back and forth between the two. I know it's not the most ideal, but thinking that I'm not going to be bottling up 300 bottles at a time, I want something that's a little bit easier. Now, I realize I'll probably have to purge the system each time or clean it out in between so nothing starts to crystallize, but that way I don't have to completely disassemble something and start over. So I'd like something that's semi hooked up. So if anybody has any ideas, any pictures,
can y'all pull a picture of this thing up?
So we got put a link to that in private chat, and I'll pull it. The only thing I find, as far as like you talking about crystallizing in a tank or anything like that, now even my bottling tank back here, even though it's a water jacketed heated tank, I find after so many, I guess 5-gallon buckets that I put in, it's a 16 or 15 gallon one. After I run so much through and it sits there for just a little bit, whenever I go to pull that handle, I notice it gets a little bit tight and I have to bump it pretty hard. Now I've drained it out, took the valve off and looked at it, and you can see that wax starting to build up in there. So I don't think it's really crystallizing that much, but that wax buildup makes that valve hard. So I'll have to flush that out.
Yeah, that makes sense. I did that last year too. So my goal was probably at least once a season, I'm going to do just what you talked about, Lee, where there may get a little bit tight inside that bottling valve there. Cause I have the same tank that you have in the background. That's a 16-gallon Max Ant. Is that right? Yeah, that's the one of the smaller one that I had, which I really like it. Honestly, it's a great tank, great setup. Is I did take them apart last year after I completely emptied them, cleaned them out, you know, even kind of resanitized everything, and then put a little bit of food grade grease inside that little the valve itself, and then I put my next bit of honey back in there too. So, I think that I'm probably going to try to work on that probably I would say, once a season I'll do that to make sure to keep it clean and keep it working properly.
What I normally do, I'll filter. Well, I say filter, honey. I strain it out. I run it through straight out of my extractor through a 400 micron.
Yeah.
And then I run it through a 200 micron. And then after it sets for a bit, I'll take the cling wrap and put on top any wax that floated to the top.
Good idea. Yeah.
That helps some, but once I put it in the bottling tank, I let it sit in there for 2 days warming up, and anything else that floats up, I'll try to use more cling wrap.
Yeah.
But you're still going to end up getting some wax in it.
Yeah. Sometimes, so I get a little conflicted about that. So sometimes I think about it and I'm like, I really don't want to strain it down too much because my goal is to keep that raw honey, right? So, I mean, but when you think about it from a perspective of when you look at it in the bottle, kind of how it looks like, you want it really clean because you want it to present well, because that's kind of what helps to sell it, besides people tasting it, of course, is the fact that people look at it and it just looks so clean and pure, but you're always kind of like, it's kind of conflicted where you're saying, well, I really don't want it too clean. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So having some of that,
even at 200 micron, you'll still see a little bit of pollen in there, and every now and then you'll see fine particles of wax floating.
Yeah. And I think that's good. That'll help keep it in that raw form, Yeah.
So Russell's asking about our cost. So we sell a pound of honey here in the St. Louis area for $12 in a plastic squeeze bottle. The bourbon honey, we sell. I'll get the bottle here in a second. We sell it's 10.5 ounces for $20. So
and we've had zero issue moving that. Now we haven't even really pushed it even that hard. And we had, again, zero issue. If people taste it, they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
That's great. It really is good.
So we are in the process of redoing the label. Melissa kind of come up with a new label. So we kind of like the clear label, but
it doesn't work on this bottle.
It doesn't work well. And we put a QR code on that too. So it needs to have a different background. So we're actually redesigning the label to put a new label on it. I just think that, again, it needed that glass presentation, and we're using that flask style bottle, which is, I think, 10.48 ounces. You said the bottle?
5.
Oh, 10.5 ounces. And again, nobody's even squabbled at the $20 price. I know I've heard some of the guys selling it for $24 for about the same. So I thought it was reasonable. I didn't want to completely price myself out of the market, but you want to get a little bit more added value on that, additional product. Kind of one of the cool things I think that I originally didn't think was kind of nice was when you aged it inside the bourbon barrel. Of course, there's all that char inside that oak, and then there's those oak staves inside there. Well, when I started to strain it out, or kind of filter it out, rather, I don't know, filter, I guess strain it. I did end up going down to the 200 microns, and I was still seeing little black flecks in there of the char. And at first it concerned me, and I was kind of frustrated with it because I'm kind of OCD about things, And the more I got to thinking about it, I'm like, you know what? I don't know why I'm trying to strain all that out, because that's kind of the beauty of it, And then I ask other people, I'm like, give me your honest answer. I'm like, when you see that in there, does that concern you? Everyone's like, no, not at all, because it's kind of a specialty. So again, I wasn't even that concerned about straining it out. So I actually may leave a little bit more in there. I mean, nothing crazy, but a little bit more in there next time, just so you can kind of visibly see that even a little bit better. So, I don't know, I guess to each their own. Everybody might have a different opinion about that, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought it would be okay. So,
and I think that's a good way to do it, because there's a barbecue place that I eat at, and you can see the pieces of burnt wood in the barbecue, and it makes the flavor so much better. It intensifies it. I like it. So
yeah,
and I had y'all's honey. It was great.
Yeah. I agree. And the more, like I said, the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, you know what? It's all good. I'm just going to leave it in there, and maybe next time I'm not going to go sprinkling it again there, but I might not work as hard to try to remove that,
Right.
But yeah, we're really pleased. Now, I'm to be really honest with you, I'm actually kind of surprised. This was a complete whim that we tried this bourbon barrel aged honey, and after we tried some, and I said, you know what, we started researching it, and I talked to a couple different guys for quite a long time who are distillers, and they were kind and gracious enough to kind of talk me through things. And then we tried it and then pulled it out. And literally it was right before Nabi, you know, we said, hey, let's enter this stuff. Yes. Small batch specialty honeys. You got it, Brian.
Yep.
You know, and we put it in that, in the honey show, and it pulled second place. And we're like, I'm just baffled. I couldn't even believe, you know? So I'm like, okay. And so we thought, hey, let's do some more.
Lee-Man, do you want to go ahead and throw the link out there for the chat? If anybody decides they want to come in while we're talking right now, you're more than welcome to come in and have a good conversation with us. Tell us your setup or your goals for the year. We'd love to hear what everybody else has, and are they ready to have a great season? And now's the time to be able to do it. So
all right, I got that dropped in if you want to pin it.
Let's see if I can do it. It's aggravating. It doesn't want to pin sometimes. I don't understand it. Got it. There we go. You're more than welcome to come in, guys. So, Tom, did you guys find another barrel to do that with? Have you located it? I mean, you got doing cream honey now. Are you still going to do the bourbon barrels?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. 100%. I don't want to stop doing that. But yeah, I have not found another barrel, but when I find some, even if I have to buy them, I'm going to go ahead and buy two. And I don't remember if Melissa had mentioned it, but the size barrel we're using, it's not a 45, 50 gallon barrel. Okay. It's only like, I think they call it a 15.
It's 15.
It's a 15 gallon barrel.
And we only put 10 gallons.
And we put 10 gallons. We put 120 pounds in there. So just, you know, for everybody in the audience here, I didn't use a huge barrel. And I had a buddy of mine make me up a nice stand with rollers that you turn the barrel on its side and set it on some rollers so you can kind of spin it. So I can get a 5 gallon bucket underneath of that. And then when I go to take it out, I can spin the barrel to where it then comes out through a strainer going back into a food grade bucket. So just for clarification for everybody.
And those 15 gallon barrels are a little bit harder to source.
They are.
So that's kind of where our holdup is right now, is trying to source another barrel.
I think generally the distillers that use those are doing, I think kind of what Brian had said there. It's a small batch type item, you know.
Yeah.
So they might be a little bit harder to come by. You know, but again, when I find a couple, I'll buy them. And honestly, as soon as I'm done with them, my intention is to actually sell them back off, and then try to get. I might at some point in time actually keep one of the barrels and try to recharge it and see just how that works out.
Did we swell the barrel first? I don't know what that means. But we didn't do anything. It was a used bourbon barrel, and we just put honey in it.
You're getting some feedback here.
Are you wanting to do that, Ricky?
I've got too many projects to give that a shot. I think I'm just going to – I'll let you do that, Spanky. You guys do the infused stuff, and I'll just sell some of your stuff.
I don't get enough honey to fill one of them barrels up.
Oh, I can give you some honey if you want to fill a barrel up.
I know a place you can get some barrels.
If I can sell it for what Tom and Melissa sold it for, and let me tell you, people, when they started tasting that honey, it was like flies just hammering this honey, or bees on honey. I mean, they were just on it. It was so amazing. It was like, I told Melissa, I was like, it's hard to sell honey to beekeepers. It really is. And the next thing you know, they were selling it left and right. And I'm like, well, just make me look bad, you know? So Tom,
I can't remember. She might have sold enough honey to buy a speed fill bottler. I don't remember.
I think she
can't remember.
All I know is Ricky kept handing me $20 bills all day. And I'm like, just had my pockets full of $20 bills. So we did not fill the barrel with water or anything. When we originally put the honey in the barrel, it didn't leak at all. It did start leaking towards the end, though. I guess when that barrel started to absorb maybe some of the moisture in the from the honey, which was kind of weird, because then when we moisture tested the honey, it was testing out at like 21 or something,
just under 21%.
So we emptied it and put it in the bottling tank, and we left the bottling tank on like right under 100 degrees.
Yeah, it's about 98,
and
99
left the
degrees.
lid off of it, so some of that moisture would evaporate out, and then he'd stir it every few days. And after about a week, it got the moisture back down. We like ours like in the 17.4 range.
Yeah, so
about a week.
You gained moisture. Is that what you're saying? Your honey gained moisture?
It did.
Yeah, it did gain
It sounds
moisture.
like that barrel was charged, and the honey pulled some of it out.
Well, yeah, because it had bourbon in it before.
Yeah.
Well, if a barrel's not charged, it'll leak like a sieve. Bohemia Bees, he had to wax coat his. That's how bad his was leaking.
That that barrel was just emptied not long ago from the bourbon.
Yeah, and I left the bung inside there so that it wouldn't dry out at all. You know, when you looked in there, you could clearly see a shine in there from moisture. You know, and I knew it was going to go up, and I had some concerns. I didn't know how it was going to work out. I thought, you know what, let's just try it. If somehow something goes completely wrong, I've just lost 10 gallons of honey. It's not the end of the world, and we'll just move on from there. But like Melissa said, we did a 90-day. It was a solid 90-day aging in that. And it wasn't until probably about the last couple of weeks I seen a little bit seeping out of the edges on the end caps that were on there. So yeah, it was definitely pulling the moisture out of it. Somebody had said to me before, you can actually on the outside of the barrel lay some wet rags over the top of it, or kind of spray that wood. Yeah, exactly. Westcliff honey. You can drape wet towels over the barrel to swell it. Somebody had said the same thing to me. I did not do that. It wasn't leaking hardly, even that much. So I wasn't concerned about it. And I knew I was getting close to the end of my 90. If I was going to do a 180 day, I would probably then start to put some wet rags over it, like the suggestions here say, to do that. But again, when we put the honey in the barrel, we're at 17.5. That's what I like to keep mine at. It went up to about 21. When I put it back from the barrel, I strained it, put it back in my bottling tank, left the lid off, turned a little bit of light heat onto it, and then I would stir it every couple of days. I got it right back down to 17.5. And that's kind of where I wanted to keep it, because I don't want any fermentation. You know, that's not my goal. It's not what I'm looking for. And personally, I actually think that honey has a slight change in flavor when you keep it below that. Even 18.6 is technically honey, right? I like that 17.3, 17.5, 17.6 range. I feel like the sugars condense a little bit and the taste is a little bit, I don't know, it's like the feels like in your mouth is a little better to me. So that's kind of what we were working toward, is getting back down. And it wasn't even a problem. I think a couple of weeks like that, and I didn't even babysit it, just stirring it through, and we got it back down to where we were looking for. So I like that 17.5%.
So Mark is asking about the barrel chunks, and we haven't done that. Obviously, this is our first go around. But Tom, talking to some other people who have done this in the area, actually, so the chunks of wood.
They're called staves.
There's such a small surface area, right? And one of the things that one of the guys that Tom was talking to had told him is, if you get this 15-gallon barrel, only put 10 gallons in it, because that way there's more surface area that's the honey is covering. So it's going to absorb more of that flavor faster. Where if you're just using the staves or the chunks or whatever, you're probably going to have to age it for a really long time in order to get all that flavor out of that wood.
I've done the chunks before. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
And you can get a lot cheaper. Ricky knows I've done some different wood flavored honeys.
Yeah. I think they refer to that term as a stave, is what it's called. And even inside that barrel, when I got it, there was a few long, 8-10 inch pieces of wood that had like spiral grooves cut into them, so they had a more surface area, and those were soaked in a bourbon, and they throw those inside there. Or actually, I guess when the bourbon was in there, they had those in there again for more sugars and flavors. Yes, Brian, I did turn the barrel fairly regularly. I would spin it back and forth just to really, get all of that, as much flavor inside there. But so if anybody was interested in doing like a small batch, you maybe don't have that much honey and you don't want to use even 5 gallons or don't want to spend the money to buy that. One thing that was suggested to me, and I don't have any reason to believe that it wouldn't work. You could probably find, I don't know, a small glass jar or something, And if you were to soak, if you go out and buy a bottle of whatever bourbon or whiskey you would like to use, or alcohol, I mean, the sky's the limit here, right? Soak those oak wooden staves inside, even a pan or a dish, and put some of that, whatever alcohol you're going to use, bourbon, what have you, and soak it for a while and let that really absorb all that. You could probably then take those wooden staves and you could put those inside whatever type of aging container you wanted to use, just to get that flavor pulled out of there. And
it'd be a smaller batch though.
Yeah. So the stand that I had was similar to that, but it sat on the floor. But the barrel looked to be, I don't know, I can't tell by size if that's says 3 liter.
Yeah.
And obviously that's from not the US if it says liter. But it's like
I don't know. I buy 2 liters in the store all the time.
Yeah. That's true. I guess you do. Yeah, I guess that's true, Spanky. But I mean, yeah, you could even use that smaller one right there, and you could probably even, put some bourbon in there and roll that barrel around it and let it really soak it up well. Then, even try a smaller batch. There's nothing saying that people have to do 5 or 10 gallons. You could do a small batch like that. So, I would say if you have a little excess honey you want to play around with, absolutely, just try it out and see how it works out for you. If you don't like it, you could give it to somebody as a Christmas gift.
I don't know if you have a picture of that.
You didn't burn 10 gallons of honey.
Yeah.
Do you know if you have a picture of that stand on here anywhere?
I might have this picture. I don't know where though.
Tom, how's everything going in your apiary? How you doing tonight?
Things going real good. I just checked one of my hives today, just because it looked like it was getting bigger and bigger, and it's already almost 9 frames of bees.
Ain't that something?
It's crazy queen that I got late last year. It's just rocking.
Wow.
So I got to really watch my hives this year because they're really growing.
I think
fast.
it's going to be a very fast spring,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure I want to get that monster hive that I got 12 8-frame nukes in it. I want to get that filled up. And I got that other monster hive that's got 3 36 frames. And it's just 3 hives, 18 on 18 basically on top of each other, and get hives established in each one of those. So that's my biggest goal this year.
It's awesome. What about you, JW? You got that army hive of yours with some bees in it yet?
No, sir. I've got to trap some bees. I set 114 swarm traps today.
Wow.
And then came in and waxed about 100 frames, and I'm setting up another bee yard.
I seen Joseph Rollins' video. He posted, and the bees, or was it short that the bees were already, searching it out. That's just blows my mind this time of year that they're already doing that.
I had a little nuke that I had lost this winter, and I just cleaned it out and set it out and sprayed a little sin in it, and the scout bees are checking it. So.
Wow. It just happens so quickly in spring.
I'm
Go ahead,
putting
Tom.
3 traps out Saturday. I'm going down my brother's farm, and I don't go down there but once every couple months, or when he calls me, there's bees in there. So I'm going down Saturday, so I'm going to go ahead and set them up. I've always catch swarms in each box. How many boxes I put on his property?
Have you got bees down there? Are you catching your own, or are they all feral bees, you think?
I don't know. There's a couple. I don't know if there's any beekeepers around there, but there's tons of bees around on his farm. So I think they're feral bees.
Yeah.
There may be some good genetics to have, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, I know all the neighbors around his 101-acre property. I know all the neighbors around him, and none of them are beekeepers. So I don't think there's any within at least a mile or 2 miles.
I'm actually worried about my hives. I'm just loaded with bees. I'd love to split, but I know I don't have enough drones or anything to, get them mated. So I'm holding off, but I may have some swarms if I'm not awfully careful, because they're busting.
Yeah, I can see that happen to me in a couple more weeks.
Yeah.
It won't be long they'll have some drones, and those hives that are ready, to bust at the seams. That's the first thing they're going to do is kick out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rodney
Sunday
said
it's supposed to be Sunday it's supposed to be it's supposed to be near 70, so I'm gonna check a couple of my bigger hives just to see if there's any drone cells started. That's most what I'll be looking for.
now Kaya is from Jamaica, and it's kind of interesting to listen to his comments. And we'll be midwinter, and his flow will be on or something. So, and just having those bees in that warmer climate, it's got to help out quite a bit.
He has a whole different system.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
Because of the weather, it's totally different.
Yeah.
One of my goals too is get average 100 pounds per my production hives. That's what I'm hoping. And I'm hoping to have 30 or 33 production, 30 production hives this year versus 24.
How much honey did you get off 24 production hives?
I got a little, they weren't on all 24, they weren't 100%. 12 of them were just new hives. I had just started. So I got 1,000 pounds out of 12 good ones. And I think I got about 150 to 200 pounds out of the 12 brand new hives. So I expect to get, if I get 100 pounds each one, I'll be close to 3,000 pounds.
Yeah, that's probably about average what we do too. Last year we had 40 colonies that we collected, harvested honey from. I wouldn't say they were all production hives, but it was like 100. We run 8-frame equipment, had 129 supers, medium supers that we pulled, and we did about 2,500 pounds of honey. So
okay.
So that's funny you said. I had 37 hives last year, and I had 3 production hives that actually produced, that were heavy producers. And just knowing how to set those hives up correctly to get them ready for that spring, for what you want for a production hive, is so critical right now. And I was so far behind the 8 ball that I actually stole some resources from other hives and then made me 3 strong colonies.
Yeah, last year our highest point, I think we had 117. Bless you. Had 117 hives. Obviously, they just weren't all production hives. Some of them were just us trying to grow the apiaries and whatnot. Some of them were mating yards, so we really didn't expect to pull any honey off of those. But out of the ones that we did pull honey from, there was about 40 hives, I think it was, that we got those supers off of.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I'm ready to retire with you, Ricky.
All right, Tom. Let's do it, brother.
I am going to part time for sure in June.
I could use some help down here in North Carolina. You just come on down here, brother.
Oh man, I'd love to move a little bit farther south. Get rid of this cold weather.
Well, I think JW's probably got some better weather because he's got some land down there in Georgia. So, is that right, JW?
Yeah. I don't take advantage of it too much. I'm too lazy, too old.
We're at in Georgia, JW.
That's in Clay County. It's in the southeast or southwest corner, very southwest corner almost. Clay and Early counties. I'm 14 miles from Alabama and about 40 miles from Florida.
Okay. Tom said we're gonna throw some hives there on our way down to Florida this summer.
That'll work.
There we go.
We'll be able to check on them a couple times a year, though.
Well, you can write off your trip then.
Yep.
My best friend a few years ago, he's a commercial beekeeper. He moved down to Alabama just so he could be a commercial beekeeper, all year round. And I always make sure that when I go down to vacation, I stop by his place.
Yeah.
Where's he located at, Tom?
What's that?
Where's he located at in Alabama, Tom?
He's in the very northeast corner of
Okay.
Alabama.
Well, he's still,
Ogden,
yeah,
little
that's still
town.
some hill country and through there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tom keeps trying to talk our boys. They'll be 18 in July. He keeps trying to talk them into doing kind of like what Chris Warner does. He lives up north, but then his family lives down in Florida. They keep the bees down there and then move them up north. He's keeps trying to talk our boys into, yeah, we can buy some property and you guys can live, down there, and we'll bring the bees down there in the winter, and then we'll bring it back to Missouri in the summer. And I'm like, no, they're not interested in that at all.
Oh. That's amazing. Assuming 60 pounds per 5 gallons, we got around 2,160 pounds last year. Gosh almighty, that's a lot of honey.
Wow. Hey, Ricky, the Greg's Pepco Pink Queen made it through winter in your hive, in that purple hive. So,
Wow. That's awesome. I tell you what, that's some good genetics that he has. Those are really gentle. I did have one of those queens that I got off of him to kick up really good, and actually got one super off that hive. So I was impressed.
yeah, I got a pretty dark one, so I know it's got Caucasian or Carney in it probably.
Probably, yeah.
And I'm kind of going more all that Caucasian Carney in my beehive just because they winter very well.
Yeah, I like the carnies for overwinter, especially where we're at.
Yeah. And Bob Beanie's got me talked into those Caucasian ones.
I tell you what, he loves those things. He really does. But I've seen some of his videos, man. They do make a ton of wax and propolis. I mean, he
Propolis, yeah.
pries those lids open, man. There's propolis everywhere. Yeah, Shannon's got
Everything else is good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep up with all the posts.
Yeah, no doubt. Shannon's got some Saskatchewan New World Carnies coming, so that's awesome.
Okay. That looks like good ones.
Yeah, I'd like to know how those turn out, Shannon, if you don't mind. She's got one of her hives, so maybe she'll put that queen in that hive, and I can get some good information from it.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah, I was good.
we've had good success with Corey's queens. They're he only sells virgins, but we've not had any issue with introducing them. We're probably like 90% success rate with his queens, and they seem to overwinter fine. And obviously, we're making plenty of honey. So,
and Jonathan, being that's where I got my queen from, was Two Rivers.
Yeah.
So it's a breeder queen. So we'll see how that goes. And I talked to Jonathan a little bit about maybe mixing some genetics if we needed to. So that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been trying to do that each year, get some different genetics.
Yeah.
I still need to get some buckfast. Maybe next year I'll probably do a couple buckfast just to get those genetics.
Tom, explain to me exactly. I don't know too much about the buckfast. I know it's just an all-around good bee, but tell me some of the special stuff about those buckfast. What genetics are you looking for to help your apiary out just a little bit?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about them because I haven't had them yet, but I think they're supposed to be pretty good bees on mites and that, and so I just want to get some of that genetics in. I mean, I've done VHS and Corey. I've done. I had some of the Martha Carpenters I got from New River about 5 years ago. I really like those actually. And I just been trying to get different breeds just to get all those genetics.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, like, me and JW, we got farm animals and stuff, and if I'm going to bring in a buck for my goats, it's going to, I'm going to bring some different genetics that I'm looking for, some different traits to help my herd out. And JW, right. You do the same thing with the cattle that you do, right? You're always bringing in some new genetics.
Oh yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm trying to do the same thing with bees.
Yeah, and that's the same thing. I mean, you're bringing those good genetics in, and you're adding those traits to your apiary. Yeah, you can't hurt yourself by doing that. I don't think.
That's what I figured. Eventually, I'll have a good mutt. That's what I'm
Yeah.
hoping. The only thing is, when I graft, I'm going to make sure I pick the darker queens. That's one of my goals this year is good honey production and darker queens.
Why do you want the darker queens?
Because I think they got a little bit more of the Caucasian and Carney genetics in them. And I seem to be gravitating towards that genetics more than anything for overwintering. I know we haven't had many winters the past 5 years, but if we ever get one of our typical winters, it'd be good to have those genetics.
Now, did any of you guys get any of the UBO testing from Phoebe when we were at Nabi? To do any of the UBO testing?
No.
Talk to me about that, Melissa. I don't know nothing about that.
Well, I'm not all sciencey like that. No. No.
Well, I don't even know what you're talking about. So give me some information.
Okay, so UBO is unhealthy brood odor. So the test kit, which I guess we could run downstairs and get it, but I guess you do like a sample size of brood and you spray the spray on it and you wait 2 hours to see if the bees have uncapped it. And then obviously the brood is healthy so that they'll recap it, but to see if the bees have uncapped it, to see how hygienic they are, if they're pulling out those sick bees. And so the idea is that they're supposed to be more hygienic, which means if there is mites and things like that, the brood is going to be sick. So they're going to pull that out. So it goes along with that VSH, type stuff. So we're doing, we about 30 kits, I guess.
I believe
20,
it was
30 kits. So we're going to test 30 of our hives and try to kind of start a queen rearing yard based on the highest scoring colonies that we find.
Yeah. We started bringing in Corey's queens, I think it was 2 years ago, or for the last 2 years rather. And with the idea that his bees have a fairly hygienic trait set, that they are, they produce that grooming behavior. So I think this is something that you can't do overnight. I think that it could take a handful of years to really saturate the area, because again, I'm not ordering from him. We're just getting virgin queens. We're not getting artificially inseminated or AI queens from him. And so knowing that our drone stock has to mate with these virgins, knowing that that's a 50-50 there. So, and I was talking with Jim Masucci, Ricky. He was the guy who had given the Varroa talk. He's a guy that I really look up to here in St. Louis. And matter of fact, I think he's gone up to, him and I were having a conversation. He's gone up to Canada a couple of times and given some talks with Ian Stepler, and those guys get along really good and kind of work back and forth with information and stuff. But anyway, so him and I have had a couple of detailed conversations. So what our goal was, and I told you here earlier today, I was working in one of the yards, adding another stand in there and doing a little cleanup and getting preparations done so I can, when the time hits, I can move some colonies over there. So what we're going to do is start testing colonies. And then in these 2 yards that I have, they're exactly about 1.8 miles apart. And I want to start moving colonies into one of those 2 yards and moving low scoring colonies out. Now, I don't think that I can accomplish that all in 1 year because I'd have to do a lot of testing, I think, in order to get there. But I think what I'm going to do is, if I start working toward it this year, I can start to saturate these 2 yards again. And I've read a little bit of conflicting information that says some people say a mile, that the queen bee will only fly a mile or so. But I've read some information that said she'll fly up to 10 miles. So I think that there's a lot of variables. I think that when we're talking about that we don't control, so, maybe to be honest with you, that might be a good thing. I think that God has this thing figured out pretty well.
Yes,
I don't know what everybody else's thoughts are. I'm a God-fearing man. So, I think that there's something to be said when it comes to, these honeybees have been here far longer than we've been here. And, this short time we've been on Earth, we think we got it all figured out. And then Mother Nature will throw a little curveball at us and let us realize and help to humble us a little bit. But so if I start saturating these again over the next couple of years and with high testing or high scoring colonies, then I can get, I think, a better hygienic behavior. Now, obviously we talk about having hygienic bees and such, and you don't want to have such a trait set in these honeybees that they're just all they do all day long is groom and they don't go out and produce honey. I mean, that would be completely silly, right? So, a honeybee's job is to gather honey. What we're trying to do is keep the bees alive longer and, longer than a couple of few seasons so that bees can continue to produce honey for us. And, if your goals are to make splits, you can make splits off of them and, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the goal that we're working toward, on that. I just love listening to these guys when they talk about this stuff and try to gather as much information as I can and try to put it to practical use, So, but the UBO testing, I have to say, I know it's kind of something that's new out, but I actually, there's enough people that I have a lot of respect for in the beekeeping community that feel pretty strongly about it. And, again, time will tell, but I really think this is probably the next best tool we have in our toolbox, so to speak, to help get more of a hygienic bee. And it seems like that, some of this actually may work from the bottom up, meaning that it may be harder for some of these commercial guys to want to grab a hold of this because some of this is kind of expensive to do, So this may be something where a hobbyist level or even, people that are in the chat right now that may only keep, a half a dozen colonies and they might decide that they want to work a little bit toward this and, creating more of a hygienic stock where they can keep their mite numbers in check and still remain healthy. That, this may be something that, again, when these commercial guys start realizing what's going on here, they may start grabbing a hold of it a little bit more, so.
Well, and to add to that too, like not only are we doing our own UBO testing and trying to saturate our mating yards, next year we've actually grouped together with 3 other people in our area and they're doing UBO testing also. So we're going to take how you were talking about bringing different genetics in, right? So we're all going to take all of our bees to a separate yard so that all those 4 groups of bees, genetics and whatnot, can kind of mix together.
Mm-hmm.
Can I talk
like a collaborative mating yard, I guess you could say.
Yeah, we're creating a couple of mating yards within a couple miles of each other at a specific spot where us and 3 other beekeepers from our area are going to do that. So, again, this is just a starting goal for us. I don't want to go out and spend $10,000 on a whole bunch of UBO testing kits. I mean, they're not cheap, but I think that, kind of like Phoebe had talked about a little bit, I think that as people start to buy these and they can get their production costs down a little bit, and there's a lot of, good positive feedback from this UBO testing kit or these kits that they're putting out. Then at that point in time, I think that they can start producing them, more on a massive scale. And then at that point in time, the net testing can come down. I think we were somewhere about, it was about $18 a test, if I remember right, because we bought 30 of them. I was thinking about doing 40 and I was kind of hee-hawing around a little bit and I decided to do 30. And I thought, you know what? I said, if I needed more vials, it wasn't difficult to get some shipped to me. So I thought, well, I'm going to start with 30 and see how far that gets me and see how many colonies that I can get moved to a central location that I like the score that they're getting. They like to see as many 4s as possible, of course. And then from there, we'll kind of continue to work, again, within a budget too. I don't want to go out and spend $10,000 and all this and have, a low percentage. So this is something that I think will take a little bit of time to do, but it'll be nice to see a positive outcome. And then maybe we can get JW hooked in on this, and we can go down and visit him, and just have a good time together.
Well,
JW's my buddy. We were palling around there with me and Ricky and JW there at the conference there at Eastern Missouri, and I think that if we had hung out around each other too much, we'd have probably got ourselves in a little trouble with some shenanigans.
I've got to say something publicly.
Okay.
I certainly don't want to hurt your feelings. Ricky smiled. I think he's got some idea. Going back to your bourbon honey, disclaimer, I didn't like it. But I don't like bourbon at all, and I'm not real crazy about honey.
Hey, that's okay. Honestly, I appreciate the honest feedback, because I've told people, I'm like, look, just because we're friends, I'm like, the worst thing you can do to me is lie to my face. If you like it, tell me. If you don't like it, tell me. So I appreciate the honest feedback.
So the thing that's funny is like we're really not drinkers like at all. I can probably count on 2 fingers how many drinks I have a year. And
you drink twice a year?
Anyway. So
no, I did.
The only reason we even did the bourbon honey was because our one son's girlfriend brought us back some bourbon honey when they went to Kentucky on a vacation this summer or whatever, and we really liked the flavor of it. So like, let's try this out. Let's see how this goes. So that's the only reason we even did it. So
well, I'm not a bourbon guy to start with, so I didn't like the taste of it.
Just open the jar up and feed it to the bees and watch them all flying into the walls.
Now, kind of opposite of what you had said, my boss where I work sometimes, she does not like honey at all. Like I've tried to get her to taste her honey and whatnot, and she's like, I just don't like honey. I don't like it. And I'm like, okay, well, we have this bourbon honey. I know that she was like kind of a sad
That's a good comment.
Her and her husband do like to go out and have a drink occasionally or whatnot. It's like, oh, well, you got to try this bourbon honey. And she loved it. She's like, this is the only honey that I've ever liked. So
what she's trying to say, JW, is your comment doesn't count.
No, that's what you're saying.
I was just playing being a smart aleck guy.
Well, hey, even if you did like it, you didn't like it, I really would like to know the truth when people, because even if I like it, I'm not going to make 10 gallons and eat it myself a year. You know what I'm saying? I want other people that are out there that really do like it to know if there's an audience out there for that.
Well, I'm certain there's an audience for it. When you can ask Ricky, I tasted it. You remember that, Ricky? I said, I don't really care for it because I'm not a bourbon, a bourbon lover. Ricky couldn't believe it. I didn't like it, but I didn't.
Yeah, he said he didn't like it. So,
well, you should have told me, Ricky. I'd have kicked his butt.
You would have kicked him out, wouldn't you? Get out of the conference.
Happened. I think that he would have turned me over and probably kicked my butt. So,
well,
I want to say something. We've gotten a couple of super chats on here, and I really was lenient about opening up super chats on my live feed. I feel like the community gives me so much already, and I didn't quite feel right about it. I talked to Lee about it just a little bit today, and when somebody does something good for me, I try to pass that along. So anybody that puts money in the super chats on here, I'm going to give a free horizontal hive away. So when we meet that level, you guys on the chat will be able to put your name in the hat and get a horizontal hive from me, and it'll be free. So I'm big on passing. When someone gives me goodness, I want to pass on goodness. And I just, that would make me feel better if we did that. So, that's the ideal I have on here. So if anybody puts money in super chats, you see that to come across, that money's going to go into a free horizontal hive for somebody at the end of the season. So if we get more money than that, we'll put 2 horizontal hives in. I don't mind at all. But we really want to help our people out in the chat. You guys are awesome. And, if you give the hive, I've already thought about this. If you give the hive to a friend, maybe a new beekeeper, I'll give you $100 and I'll give them a free horizontal hive. So that's just something I want to do. I'm going to put that out there. Rick's not banking money for super chats. It's an honor for you guys to give me money and feel like you say, hey, Rick, you're awesome. I'm getting good information from you guys. I appreciate that. It's a great honor, but I want to pass that along to other people. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Spanky, did you have something? You started to say something.
I was trying to talk about that UBO, and Gunline had mentioned about the mites immediately jumping off the larvae back onto the bees. But part of the problem with that is, even if they do that, they only breed in the cell. So if you've got very accurate detection and removal, then you're essentially eliminating the breeding hotels that they set up. And they don't really have to worry about drones because it's more unlikely for the drone to chew itself out than the worker. They noticed that in the Asian variant of honeybees, because we use the European ones. Over on what's his name? Inside the Hive TV, he talked about it. The workers are very sensitive to the varroa, and so they give off the odor to remove them. The drones, on the other hand, they just leave them. They don't pull them out. And then the mites can't get out, and eventually they die. But like Bob said the other day on one of his, you can have hygienic behavior and not have that VHS behavior. Like if you've got bees that bite the mites, well, that's hygienic, but it's not the VHS standard of having them remove the larvae from the cells. So if somebody's telling you they're VHS and that they like attack the mites or they fly them off, ask them if they've actually done like a nitrogen test or the brood odor test, what the results were on that, or if they're just telling you that their bees are hygienic but they've not actually done those tests. Because that's an important thing that people don't know about, is that those tests, they're standardized. They got a certain amount of brood that they affect. They go through certain times. They calculate all that up. They figure out how many are dead, how many have been removed, how many have been kept in the nitrogen case, because they're killing the bees with the nitrogen. With the brood odor, it's different. They see how many have been uncapped, but it's the same point that they're very meticulously going over this, and they're trying to produce a bee that's really good at that. And one of the reasons why your commercial people may not want to go with that is losing that genetic advantage over crossbreeding over the seasons with the local bees, whether it be their own stock they currently have or just the wild stock around them. You could lose that unless you go and buy a whole new apiary over again to refresh that stock. And they may not want to deal with that. They may not see the cost to be worth it.
Here, hand me that. I gotta see if I can turn it off.
Hey, I want to put in a quick plug here for Ricky. You know, I know you're a super humble guy, but I got to throw this out there. I put it there in the comments, but I got to say, for anybody that doesn't know Ricky Rourke, and honestly, his wife, Ruth, I'll tell you what, and I mean this with the most sincere heart as I can possibly say it. You will never meet a more kind couple than those two right there. I mean, I'm just saying what you guys seen with what he is offering up today. That's just proof right there. Again, I feel like sometimes whenever Ricky's made me some of this stuff, he should have been charging me more for it when it comes to this. Because I'll tell you, when Ricky does something, he puts his heart into it. It's quality over quantity. And the two of them just have, I mean, just a heart after God. I mean, they're just absolutely phenomenal people. So, I mean, it's worth taking a minute just to say that these two, I mean, you will never meet a more kind individual and couple than those two right there. So
I appreciate that, Tom. That's very nice of you to say. There's lots of good couples out there. You and Melissa are, and Kim and Hannah are. There's lots of good people. Appreciate JW. I mean, really, thank you, Mac. I appreciate that. And I didn't. You guys are making me speechless here. I'll be honest with you.
Hey, I'm changing the subject. I got a question for you, Rick. How
All right,
far
David.
off of the Appalachian Trail are you there in the hills? Are good ways, or
We are probably, I don't know mileage wise, but we're at least 20 to 30 minutes away, and they've actually are hooking the mountain. We call this the peak, where we're at, and they've actually hooked up Elk Knob to that, and they're looking at hooking Elk Knob up to the Appalachian Trail as an off trail. So we're pretty close to the Appalachian Trail, but that's a great hike. I'd love to do it from the start to the end. I think that would be awesome.
Well, I'm getting too old for that, but I've got a son and a grandson that's done part of it. And what I was considering was bringing them down and dropping them, and they can't do the whole thing. My grandson's in college. He just using his spring break. They did some last spring. They're doing some more this year. I was going to make a bee run while they were down there. I thought I might come by. I didn't know how far away you were. I was going to go by Benny's and a couple, 3 places. And I've got a brother down outside of Atlanta. I was going to visit him and come up through there, pick them back up. They're going to be down there a few days. That's the reason I was asking.
Well, they'll probably come. They'll get close to getting up next to Boone, North Carolina, probably. That's probably 3 or 4 days hike to get up that far, and that's very close to where we're at.
Yeah. Tom, I got a question for you on the Virgin Queens that you get. When do you normally get those?
Well, I graft my own usually around middle of April, 1st of April.
Tom, no offense.
Hey, I'll let Tom Mack do his, and then I'll answer.
There we go.
We have to specify which Tom it is.
And I let them emerge out, and I mark them for the year, and have no issue introducing them into hives.
Go ahead, Tom. And then
Tom.
You were asking. I'm sorry, JW. You were asking the process of which we introduce those to the hive. Is that correct?
No. What time of year do you get those from down there?
When? Yeah. So the queens that I was getting obviously were from Corey Stevens. He's in southern Missouri, so he's probably pretty close to where you are at when you're talking north to south.
Sure.
I think that probably generally speaking, he can probably have those. I would say on an average year, he would probably correct me if I'm wrong here, but in Missouri, it's probably unlikely to have any virgin queens before. I'm probably thinking April, the very beginning of April, maybe even April 15th. Anyway, and I think probably he can go pretty well through June. And again, I think that, he talks a lot about that. But anyway, I've kind of said all that to say I have gotten mine from him in May. But what I was going to try to do this year, and I talked to him a little bit about it, hopefully he's not overwhelmed with it, which I have a feeling that he will be, is I would like to I'm going to do an initial 30 from him, and then I'm going to do another round sometime in June before our honey flow completely cuts off. So I can grow the first 30 and then get them in full-size boxes right away during our honey flow, and they should grow pretty quickly. We actually got most of those grown into 2 boxes, and some of them even supered with a little bit of honey the first year, last year. on a good flow, of course. So this year I'm gonna do 2 different rounds. So the very beginning of May, I think it was the last weekend in April, beginning of very first part of May is when I had gotten those from him. So, and I just kind of use his method for introduction. I think generally speaking, people tend to be a little bit standoffish when it comes to the virgin queens. But if you kind of follow his method, he calls this the Stevens method, but really he even says that he thinks it just what he was doing is just replicating Mother Nature. Whereas when a virgin queen pops out, say it's a swarm cell, that original mated queen has stopped laying because they run her around. They don't, getting her ready for her to swarm, right? So really, when that virgin queen pops out, there are no eggs to be found inside there. And actually, at that point, generally speaking, most of the time, there is not even young enough larvae in there for them to make another queen cell off of if they needed to. So it kind of leaves them in a hopelessly queenless stage. So basically you're thinking from the last time the egg was laid up until basically, I guess that would be day 7. I guess that'd be day 10, I think. So 3 days for an egg and then 6 to 7 days for that young larvae in there. So anyway, they really can't make queens beyond that. So that's when he starts to do his introduction. And I've just followed that. So I basically, if I know that Corey reaches out to me the week before and says, hey, just want to give you a heads up. I've got all these queens. They'll be hatching out. I'm going to be shipping them on Monday morning, overnight. You're going to see them on Tuesday. I basically go out there and build all my splits then. So that way I build them a week ahead of time. Then I know at that point in time, I might come back in 4 or 5 days and then scratch all those cells out. And then I'll, a couple days ahead of time, put it all back together. And I know when those queens come in, before I do that, even maybe the night before, I'll go out there and I'll scratch any additional cells that they may have even tried to make as just an emergency. I scratch all those out. So I leave them completely hopeless. And then I come back in right after that. And the next day I just start popping those virgin queens in there. And as long as we're on a decent honey flow or there's nectar coming in, I don't have any problem. Our success has been up around the 80-85%. I do notice that when you get closer to, there's not much nectar flowing on, the getting those queens back mated, it drops a little bit. So I don't know if that timing of the year, maybe there's more dragonflies out picking them off, maybe birds, a certain type of pest, or a predator that's out there trying to pick those off. But as far as
acceptance, we've never had issue with acceptance.
No, not by using that method, basically. So for me, it's worked well. And generally speaking, you can get virgins a little cheaper than you can mated queens, right? So the only thing I'm going to do differently this year is I think I actually want to try queen cells, much like a lot of your commercial guys will use as queen cells. So I'm going to basically work the same method, and then I'm going to drop queen cells in and just see how it works out for me.
We're not sure when we'll be able to get the queens from Corey, though, because he's doing his ordering different this year. Since he's gone into this full time this year. You used to just order queens from his website, and then as soon as he gets them in stock, he'll ship them out to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now he's not opening up ordering until he has them ready to go. Like as soon as they're ready to go, he's going to post on his site that they're available, and you basically have to be on there ordering them that day.
Yeah. So there's a question on here that I'd like to try to answer. DC's B says, I hear virgins are more temperamental to have shipped. So I can only speak from a limited few years experience. I'm not preface this with, I'm not a 20-year, 30-year beekeeper. But I will tell you my experience is, and again, talking with Corey in great lengths about things. And I believe Corey had said he will only ship overnight.
Right.
So keep this in mind. I've heard information out there, and again, I'm not a scientist. I don't have a PhD, but I will say that I know that I've heard people talk about you really want to get a virgin mated within about 2 weeks, because the likelihood of that queen getting mated after 2 weeks, I think dramatically drops. And that could be a couple different days moving It could be a little bit before 2 weeks, a little bit after. And I think with Mother Nature, there may not be any hard lines as far as that goes, if that makes sense. But he ships them overnight. And I also think about it like this, that, one thing that most people really have never talked a lot about is
UPS ships them overnight too.
Yeah, he uses UPS. I'm not a huge fan of the Postal Service myself. Just my own experiences. I've heard a lot of horror stories, and anybody can make mistakes. I realize that, but often when we'll bring stuff in, we'll use UPS, and I'll overnight the stuff in. That way, that's less bouncing around in transport and things of that nature. Because most of these transporters, they're trying to get the quantity out, so they're not going to take extra special care of a live insect or what have you. They're going to, it's going to treat it like any other package, basically. There might be exceptions to that rule, but I will say one thing about when it comes to mated queens, and that I've heard about, and this is something to think about too when people are having mated queen ship. If you're having a mated queen ship, I'm still a fan of having fairly quick shipping done for that. I think it's worth the extra cost, because I've heard of them talk about where a grower, let's say in Georgia, can actually have a mated queen, and legitimately she is laying very well. But when they put her in a box to ship her wherever it might be, if there's some reason the inside of that truck or wherever she was at reached, extreme temperatures, maybe above 105 degrees, it's possible that that queen could still be alive and have some viable sperm still left in her spermatheca. But it's also very possible that some of those temperatures could damage a lot of the sperm in there too. So when you get her in and maybe she's laying, but it's just not a great pattern, maybe that queen actually was very viable before that, but then after this hot transport, it's very possible that that queen could have been damaged and you just not know it. And you're thinking that at that point, you're just blaming the breeder, saying, well, they just did a poor job, when really that may be an unfair statement to throw out there. So this is just some information that I've heard, back when it comes to bringing queens in. So again, my experience is not that they have been temperamental. I've gotten the couple years I've had them shipped in, all of mine have always been alive. But again, at the time of year I'm bringing them in May, it's not usually hot. It's an overnight ship from southern Missouri here to the middle part of Missouri in St. Louis. So it's not like they're bouncing from California to here. So I can only speak toward exactly my experience on that, and that's how mine has worked. All the queens have always arrived to me alive and looked very vibrant.
Well, I use
clarification on virgin queens. When they emerge from their cell, they're not ready to mate, get going their mating flights, so at least the 6th day, 6th to 7th day. So you have plenty of time right after they emerge to ship them out, next day to any beekeeper, at least to, within half the United States, and not have to worry about them not be able to get out and get mature enough to fly.
Yeah,
the 6th day.
I completely agree with that, Tom. And that's the same information that I've heard in the past, is that, that queen is not going to go out and fly on a mating flight within a day or two. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
She needs to be fed, and she needs to have that energy built up when they're,
Corey said you need to get them in the hive as soon as possible, though, because they need to be fed. He ships them with attendants, but the attendants are only going to be able to feed that queen for so long. But he said it's important if you're not putting them in the hive immediately, you need to at least water them and then get them in the hive as soon as possible, so that the other bees can tend to that queen.
If for some reason you're not able to get them into a hive right away, this is what Corey Stevens has told me, and I've heard him repeat it multiple times. He goes there and feeds them at least, I think, twice a day.
2 or 3 times a day.
And that's water and honey. And honey. It's both. So
yeah, what I do, Tom, when I introduce virgin queens, I know since I do my own grafting, I know when they're going to merge out. So the day before I make my nukes up, I put the virgin actually in a queen cell. In a cell, in a cage. And I set that cage on top of all my little nukes, and I just give them 5 minutes, and I wait and see if they're biting or not biting. And 95% of them, they're not biting the hive. I had one last year that the nuke was they were attacking her. So I got all the bees off. I moved it to another nuke. Same thing happened. I moved it to another nuke. Same thing happened. I said, "This is a bad virgin queen." Pinched her.
Hey, I think
Said,
sometimes those bees might know more than we do. You know that?
yeah, I gave that queen 3 chances, and none of the 3 liked her.
Yeah.
So then I just release her out. If they're taking care of her, not biting the cell, I just let her out. I pull the cork and let the bees come in and out and let them do their thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard people doing that direct releasing queens like that, especially virgins. Sometimes those bees won't pay a whole lot of attention to her, and I don't know if it's because she doesn't have a strong pheromone profile to her yet, because I think it takes a number of days for her to develop that pheromone profile. And I'm sure too, after mating, she probably has a pretty big different. There's a large gap when how she smells, as opposed to after mating.
I think that's why it works, because she's not even a day old, 24 hours old. So I don't think she smells that much, and the bees just don't care that much. They get a little excited, but nothing like introducing a mated queen.
Yeah, for sure.
So DC said something about he'd rather grow his own queens, and that's kind of our goal. Honestly, is we're trying to get the genetics in that we want, right? And flood that area with the drones from those genetics, and then start rearing our own queens from that. So we're trying to get the genetics in our yard that we want first, and then rear after that.
That's basically what I do. I raise most of my own queens just off of swarm cells. I try to watch for swarm cells and take them out and use them instead of. I do a little grafting, but not that awfully much. The only time I use button queens normally is, so as an old cattleman, I'm saying out crosses, to introduce a new set of queen genetics to some of my colonies. And I won't have them shipped. I'm close enough to Corey or wherever I get them. If I buy out cross queens, I go pick them up myself. I try to buy.
I'm gonna have you pick some up for me and bring them up to me too. Then
I can do that. No problem.
So I got a question for the group. I've bought queens a couple of years, maybe 3 years in a row. There's always one queen. I don't understand this. They'll let her lay maybe 2 frames of brood up, and next thing you know, I go in there. There's a supersedure cell in there, and they're ready to get rid of that queen. And I just don't understand that. Why does that happen?
I'm wondering if that's not like she really didn't get mated well, and they know that, so they're letting her lay enough just so they can supersede her.
Okay, I was always
Ricky, was this I'm sorry, I missed the first part. Was this a queen that you purchased?
Yeah, I've had that to happen at least 2 seasons, maybe 3 seasons of some queens that I've ordered. There's always one queen, and they supersede her usually, or they're supersedure cell. I actually took one of those queens out, let that hive supersede her, took her out, put her in another hive, and that other hive ended up killing her before it's all said and done.
That would be my guess, is either she didn't get mated well, so they just let her lay enough so they can make their own queen, or like Tom said, she was somehow damaged in shipping because of temperature fluctuations or whatever, and they can sense that, and so they just they let her lay enough so they can make their own queen.
Okay, I was always curious about that.
I think that's pretty common. I think I would guess 20 or 30% of them.
Oh, okay.
I've actually even heard somebody actually have a theory too, and they actually said, I don't have science behind this. They said, but if let's just suppose that you did have a queen breeder that doesn't let that queen lay for a solid 3 weeks, and I've heard this multiple times from
Bob Binney,
great sources saying that a queen needs to be, if you're going to sell mated queens, that queen needs to have been mated and laying in the hive for at least 3 weeks in order to get some, I guess, a round of cap brood going, right? So he had also said that he thinks that it takes quite a long time for that pheromone profile to really fully develop. And he said that, if I remember correctly, that sometimes, even though this queen may be accepted and start to lay, she may not have a real strong pheromone profile about her. Whereas I think that some of the workers might think that, again, she might be inferior in some way, shape, or form. Now, again, I don't believe he said he had any science behind it, but he said just an observation and just, things that he had noticed, which to me kind of made sense. Again, I don't have a PhD, but it made a lot of sense to me when he said it. So that's another theory that possibly could be going on there.
You know, another thing a lot of people don't realize, you go to these queen breeders and they're doing thousands of queens. Let's say they did 1,000 queens. They need 20,000 at least drones. And it's like a lot of these people that do queens don't have. I mean, maybe at the first beginning batches of them, they have enough drones, but once they get into a few weeks into grafting, their drone numbers are going down, down, down.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
I've actually heard, so I think on our Great Plains Master Beekeeping program that we're going through, if I remember right, and I probably should look it up, and so I'm trying to go by memory, so hopefully I paid enough attention in class. I believe that they said that you would, to have what we would consider well-mated, and that can be a little bit, I don't want to say controversial, but that definition might vary amongst people a little bit, right? A well-mated queen should have mated with at least 15 to 17 drones. So that's quite a bit, And I've heard that
20.
actually they found
Julia Mahood, when she came last week over, she said it's even more than that. Like between 20 and 30 sometimes.
Well, and I'm sure the more matings, the better off she's going to be. If she gets that spermatheca completely full, that way she may lay not just for a month and then kind of peter out. She might get a few years out of her.
Beanie did it special with some doctor, and he was saying that most queens, if there's enough drones, get mated by 30 up to 70 drones.
Yeah, I have heard that.
He was saying drones that had mated more than 30 were 8-fold better against mites.
Interesting.
So I see all these people, freezing their drone frames, and it's like, no, you should be doing just the opposite. Put drone frames in and get as many drones as you can out flying in that field.
Well, that's what we're doing in our mating yards.
Diversity of genetics.
Absolutely, I agree with that, Tom. We bought from Dwayne at Dogwood Ridge Bees. I bought 55 drone cone frames, and those are all going in 2 different apiaries. And every large colony, they're going to be getting those here probably within the next. When they start to build some drone cells, I'm putting these in there, and they're going to build a little bit of comb. All these frames are going to be going in all those colonies there.
Every one of my 10 frames get a drone frame.
Yeah. So Russell Koopman had brought up a really good point here, and he says if there isn't brood of all stages when introducing a new queen, they will supersede also. I think that I personally agree with what he's saying there too. And I think that kind of goes back to what we were saying. A queen that's been laying for a solid 3 weeks, and if you want to be really particular, call it 4.
And I read 24 days. They need to be laying to be fully laying.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, I guess, in that time frame, 2.5 weeks or so.
And so that's always a good question to ask when you buy your mated queen. How many days they let them to lay? And I wouldn't buy one if it was less than 21 days.
Yeah.
They say 14 days, which is pretty typical. There's a good chance you'll have issues with that queen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Jonathan brings a good point here. It says Bob's video on polyandry indicated that the more diverse number of drones, the more hardy the hive is, a hybrid vigor.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about.
Yeah.
That video. It was a very good one.
He has some really good information he puts out there. You know, I'm telling you, anybody who is from a new beekeeper to an experienced one, if you can't learn something from Bob Benny, I don't know if there's much hope for you. You know, that man puts it across in a way that is very, very, just non-judgmental and just great information. You know,
Yeah, gentle giant.
he is definitely, and the guy knows what he's talking about. I mean, without a doubt. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm ready for this spring, that's for sure.
And I think that's a good way to do it, Joseph. They got to have some brood merged.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm the same way.
You know, I did a queen last year, and again, I did my queen rearing early, and one of those queens was laying really good when I sold her to a gentleman, and then all of a sudden she just stopped laying, and I told him, I said, man, I don't know what happened. She was laying good when she was here. I said, but you know, I've got some good queens, so you know, here you go, and I took him another queen over there, so
yeah.
It can happen sometimes, but that was a brand new queen. I don't know why. When I had her, she was laying good, and when he got her, and it was horrible. I mean, she was laying two little spots on either side of the frame, so I don't know what happened.
That's interesting. Do you think the colony that he introduced the queen to just didn't have the proper numbers?
I don't know. I mean, I sold him a nuke. I mean, it had the numbers in it. It should have. So
I'm sorry, it was a whole nuke. I'm sorry, it was a nuke. It wasn't the queen. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Silly question.
Yeah. Ricky, I had a queen that I got from New River. It was a Martha Carpenter queen.
Yeah.
When I first introduced her, she laid about 3 frames of brood, and then she kind of stopped. But they never superseded her. They kept her. And anytime I went into that box, she would stop laying for like 2 weeks.
Really?
And then she'd lay about 2 or 3 frames and then stop. 2 or 3 frames. I kept her for 3 years. And she did made it through winter, everything. Just in a nuke. She never made it out of a nuke.
I think what she was doing, Tom, was she was creating her own brood breaks, right? Figure it out.
Yeah, she didn't have to treat her anything. She was a perfect bee for a beginner beekeeper. If they didn't want any honey or anything.
You never had a treat that high for mites because it always did brood breaks, right?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. And then they superseded her finally after the 3rd year, and that was the best queen I've ever had.
Yeah.
So talking about that right there that you just talked about, Tom, and I'm going to throw this out here that some very, very experienced beekeeper gave me some advice at the Missouri conference about this artificially inseminated queen that I bought and spent all this money on it. And he told me, and he about broke my heart, he said, get as many queens off of her as fast as you can. Mm-hmm. He said, because she's not going to last long. Yeah. And he said, and I thought, well, I can take her genetics, and start selling queens right away. And he said, well, you're really selling a mutt. He said, you really need her offspring to make drones to breed to, what did he say? To breed back with the new queens that you're going to be making. He said, so you're really looking at the next year before you're actually making closer to purebred queens, and you have to have the right location that those drones are getting with the right virgin queens, right?
Absolutely.
And I'm like, oh no, my whole ideal.
You're talking about mated queens, aren't you?
Right.
Yeah, mated queens. Yeah.
See, that's kind of what we're trying to do with our yards that we're putting those drone frames in. Mm-hmm. Are just over a mile away from each other?
1.8.
So we're gonna try it. We want Corey's genetics. We want that VSH. Yeah, I always see
VCR queens.
VHS. I'm like, I'm just gonna call them VCR queens.
There you
So
go.
anyway, anyway, so we want Corey's queen genetics because we like that VSH thing, and we know Corey isn't just breeding for VSH; he's also throwing traits of honey production and other things in there that we like also. So the queens that we're getting are virgins, but her drones are all going to be VSH genetically right also. So if we flood the area with her drones,
right,
then anything that mates in our yards is going to be, theoretically mating with VSH drones. So that's kind of what we're trying to do in our 2 mating yards that we have going on. Obviously, unless we get the bees tested, we can't, ever say, yeah, she's completely mated with VSH drones. But
I want to produce. I want to give Cardinals out if that's I got a Cardinal queen, and I want to make people. I feel bad giving a queen out that's not a true Cardinal. You know what I'm saying? So my whole idea was totally messed up, and this certain beekeeper at Charles' conference, when he started talking to me, I thought my heart was going to drop out of my chest. I was like, my whole ideals on queen rearing this year is not what I thought at all.
So here's some good news for you, Ricky. If you read Mark Miller's comment, he says, Ricky, I've got an AI queen from Corey that's on her 3rd year. So,
oh wow,
I think what he might have been saying, and I've heard this information before, where an AI queen, I don't know generally how many drones they pull sperm out of. It may not be 15 to 20. It may only be, I don't know. And each breeder can probably be a little different maybe when they're artificially inseminating. If he only does, 10 drones, at some point in time, maybe she'll get superseded much quicker, after that first season or after her first spring of laying. That may be of where he had that information, because I've heard people say that before. Mm-hmm. They don't release pheromones like a mated queen. Yeah. Yeah. So some of this is new to me. I don't have practical experience with it. I just have regurgitating some information that I heard from reputable beekeepers.
So
I have a lot of 2 to 10 frame beekeepers around me. I probably got 15 of them within 2 miles of me. So the last 2 years now, if I have any extra queen cells that I know I'm going to have when I graft in the summer solstice, I just give them to them.
Yeah,
I know what genetics or close to genetics what they have, so I'm kind of helping out my whole area around me.
That's a great idea, and it's something people may not think about. If you can understand people that are within 2 to 3 mile radius of where you're at, and probably one good way to figure that out for anybody who might have a drone, and when I say drone, I don't mean a bee drone. I mean an actual UAV, unmanned, air vehicle. If you have that, and the best time to do it is before all the trees start to get foliage on them and leaf out, fly that thing around your area. Just if you're practicing playing, fly it around with the camera down and just start looking for what looks to be hives. You don't need to fly it up at 400 feet. You can probably just hit the treetops at 100 feet and just, I wouldn't hang out over anybody's yard. You may get some bad stares or some negativity off that. But, if you fly that around your area enough, you can probably understand a little bit better who has hives within your area. And then if you scope that out, you see where that address is at, go make friends with them and offer, like Tom said, go offer them some queens. And that'll probably be the best way you can help to propagate a certain line of genetics, or more probable way to do that.
Right. Half of them are beekeepers I've sold nukes to over the years.
You said it was
believe it or not, I don't have any beekeepers within 10 miles of me.
You're in a good spot, JW. You can do what you want then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do that anyway.
I already knew you were a rebel.
question.
So it says she's a virgin and mated with feral or drones from one yard or one's yard. How does it make a full genetic of VSH? Wouldn't you receive genetics from another genetic? That's absolutely right. There's only so many things that you can control when it comes to that. And that's why I said, and Tom had kind of pointed out, he gives some of his queens away. At least there, half of those genetics will be coming from the bee that he had offered up. So if you can kind of help to propagate an area within, I would say a good few miles of where you're at, that will help you better control your area and control your drones. But, even at that, the more I've talked to Jim Masucci, he worked for Monsanto and Bayer for like 24 years, specifically on this. A very intelligent guy. I feel like the more I talk to him, the less I know, if that makes sense there. And him and I have had detailed conversations about this. And I feel like, again, the more I talk about it with him, the less I'm getting what I want, just because there's so many of those variables out there that we really don't have control over, but we really want to control. So yeah, that's definitely a good point.
Well, I'll add to that too, that, the queen that we're buying from Corey, she's a virgin. So she is going to mate with a feral drone, right?
Likely.
So all of her fertilized offspring are going to be half VSH, VHS, whatever.
VSH.
And half feral, right? But all of her drones are unfertilized. She's VSH, so all of her drones are going to be VSH. And that's our goal, is to saturate our area with her drones so that when we do start grafting from other VSH queens, they're going to hopefully mate with those VSH drones. And then we will have a 100% VSH queen. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
So if you have to remember, and Corey says it best, and you should watch some of his videos again if you're more interested in queen rearing and understanding these things. If you have a virgin queen and she mates, the eggs that she ends up laying that are unfertilized are her eggs. So that drone does not have a father. It only has a grandfather, right? So if you think about it like that, because it's an unfertilized egg. So it doesn't matter what bees she mated with in your area, the drones that she produces are of her, because again, they don't have a father, only a grandfather. Whereas all of her,
Alejandra just said the same thing you're saying.
Yeah,
so it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Alejandra, the orchard Napier.
Thing you can think of when your neighbor beekeepers' queens are getting mated, they're getting mated from your drones or some of your drones, which kind of what stock you have in your yard, especially if you're buying diversity like I've been doing. So I already know that some of their queens, some of their bees your drones already have some of my genetics in it. So we're just trading genetics. And if I do this enough years, 3 or 5 years, we should be flooding our whole neighborhood with all these diverse genetics.
Yeah. DC's got a very good point here when he says that. I mean, it's his opinion, and I would be of the same opinion. He says, but it takes more to get the saturation that people think, even more so if you are in bee country. Whereas I think what he's trying to say is, even if you understand and if you know every beekeeper within your area, if JW has 3 other beekeepers in his area, he knows them all. He knows what they do. There is still always that area of uncontrolled bee population that are feral bees that are out there. You can't know what those are because they don't have welcome mats outside the front door or the American flags hanging on the tree, so to speak, knowing that, hey, this is our house. Here's where we are. You just can't know that, right?
Right.
So, but the good thing about it is if those are feral bees, right, they've got some kind of genetics that's keeping them going, right?
Absolutely.
So
exactly.
That's a plus also in itself.
And here's something else I'll add to your comment, Ricky. The one thing that we do is we want to keep our bees from not brooding down. We, unless we're splitting them down, we don't want them to start to go, kind of dormant. Whereas really, if you think about it, in Mother Nature, there's constant brood breaks with these colonies because when they swarm, there's a brood break. Well, when we put them in managed colonies and boxes, unless you're physically letting that happen, which on, say, a commercial side, if that's your living, you're probably not going to let that happen because it's going to be much harder for you to make money if you're constantly creating these brood breaks and such, right? Unless it's a split. So, when we put them in managed colonies, I think that's why we have more of a problem with mites, because they continue to grow and double and triple every time that they, you have another brood cycle inside there. So, in managed colony, I think it's a little more difficult. So, Hale Hives actually says, I've heard that Corey's VSH line is a little spicy. Has that been your experience? So I will say this. In my experience that we've had in the last 2 years, sometimes they can be maybe a little bit more temperamental, but I haven't. So, and sometimes again, depending on the time of the year, the time of day,
times,
they'll be a little more aggressive. And of course, that's kind of a bee nature thing, of course, when they're not as busy. But I haven't noticed anything. So if I was to put it on a scale of like 1 to 10, 1 not being aggressive whatsoever and 10 being really aggressive, like borderline Africanized, I'm going to probably throw them in there somewhere in the category of about maybe a 4. So I wouldn't say they're the most docile bees, but they're definitely not chasing you down the road with you flailing your arms around screaming bees, as a, kind of like a cartoon type thing.
Yeah, Corey said he's got mild, medium salsa bees.
I think that's what he describes them.
Is what he said.
Yeah. He also described it this way too. He said, if you live in a neighborhood with a lot of neighbors, he goes, maybe these would not be the best for you. But if you don't have neighbors that are really close, then you know what? It's probably not a big deal. Whereas all of our out yards don't have any houses around them, with the exception of our own where we live at. But most of the time, I don't keep any large colonies here. We just grow stuff. We mate stuff here, and we put it out in the production area somewhere. So I don't let anything get too big. And if there's anything that ever gets aggressive, I move it out very quickly. And depending on the aggression level, if they're just unworkable, the queen's going to go away. We'll have to replace her. So that's been my experience.
A couple of years ago, I bought 3 Russian queens that was supposed to be pretty full genetic, closest they could get Russians. And I would say they weren't temperamental, but I had to treat them a little bit differently. I noticed after I was working with them, as soon as I popped that lid, the inner cover off, there would be 20 or 30 of them that would fly out.
Yeah.
But if I would just step away 2 steps, wait 30 seconds, they'd all fly back in. And then they'd be just like any other bee.
Yeah. I think I heard you said it before, and I thought that was pretty interesting how you pointed that out. Sometimes I think the way that people handle bees, I think that's something to think about. So when you go up to a colony, let's just say you have 2 or 3 hives on a stand, whereas bees are very, very sensitive to any disruption, whether it be a jostling of a hive or anything like that. So if you are a person who is a little bit aggressive, when you walk up to your hive stand with 3 colonies on there and you slap your smoker down, or you flop your hive tool down, or you take the brick and bounce it around, you understand. I mean, I'm just saying, if I lived in an apartment building and, thinking about this as human nature, and you're a neighbor that's constantly bouncing around in there, you and I are probably not going to get along really well. So,
get along fine.
Again, and I think something to recognize too as beekeepers, when you go into a hive, like, Tom said, if you aren't banging around and you come into it, you can move quickly, but not be reckless, right? You pop the top, you maybe put a couple puffs of smoke in and let it settle for maybe 15 or 20 seconds. Let those bees roll back down, turn their heads around a little bit, take your top off without banging around. And maybe, again, throw another little puff of smoke there and step back for another maybe 5 or 10 seconds. Let them kind of chill out for a minute and then start to go in there. Whereas when you pull a frame or you push a frame, try not to roll a bunch of bees, because if you start rolling bees, I guarantee that alarm pheromone is going to roll through that hive like a wildfire.
Bananas
and
everywhere.
if you have a colony that's just slightly aggressive, you are going to turn those guys on. I mean, and it may not be a good reaction. So again, when you handle bees in there, think about this. If you feel like you have spicy bees, do this. If you're a person that wears gloves, take your gloves off. If you take your gloves off, you will be a much more gentle creature going into a hive than otherwise being protected. I think Chris Warner had said it best that because they do a lot of queen breeding, nobody's allowed to wear gloves in his yard. And he said they do that for a reason. I think multiple reasons, but one of them is you'll treat with less protection on, you'll treat bees differently than if you're fully suited up, So if you know that bees can't get to you, you might be like, well, I'll just kind of crash them through here, no big deal. And the bees are flying all over the place and they're wound up. But if you were wearing minimal protection, you're probably going to be a little bit more cautious, about doing that. And even, being able to feel what it is that you're doing, I think is a pretty good thing too. So keep that in mind when you're going in there. Try to pull that frame straight out. Don't roll the bees. Don't bang stuff on top of the hive or the hive stand. Yes, DC's Bee says smooth touch. I agree with that.
DC had a good point up there. Russian bees they do like to rob out other hives, and they're the most aggressive bee that I know of for being robbing tendencies.
Yeah.
So I didn't buy any more because of that reason. I had all those mating nukes, and they wanted to kill every mating nuke there was.
Yeah. If you have mating nukes in there and you have some bees that like to be a little bit robby and you're kind of in a borderline dearth area, if you want to lower the mating success in your yard, put some aggressive bees out there. You will probably drop way off on your mating success if there's bees trying to rob. I think Bob Benny has a video and he talks specifically about that, being cautious about leaving a hive open even too long. If you notice bees starting to get a little bit robby, shut that stuff down, close the hives up, come back to it later, especially in a mating nuke, because that is such a sensitive time that you really don't want to mess with any colonies. If you put a queen in there or virgins or queen cells, leave it alone for a solid 3 weeks. I know sometimes people want to come back to them, but just completely leave them alone, walk away from them, because your success rate is probably going to go way up than disruptions. Those bees, when they get disrupted during a virgin queen introduction, I've heard of so many times them just balling and killing her because for whatever reason, I guess she gets blamed for the disruption and the disturbance.
So Sarah said something about she doesn't like the propolis on her hands and she uses nitrile gloves. I don't like using nitrile gloves because your hands get so sweaty in them and they rip so easy. And so I started buying like the cheap $1.50 dishwashing gloves at Walmart, and I can get, a couple weeks. I mean, they smell horrendous, like you're a hockey player, but after you've sweated in them a couple times, but because they have like a cotton inside of them, just a thin layer, so it'll absorb all that moisture. So your hands aren't all sweaty and nasty, at least. But they're thin enough that you're still the bees can still sting through those. I get, but you have a lot more dexterity with your fingers with those dishwashing gloves. So those
I like the nitro gloves myself. I think I can get
sign off.
Feel out of them.
Night, Tom.
So,
see you later, Tom.
Night, everyone.
I really like the feel of the gloves, being able to feel the bees and stuff. So I like the nitro gloves a lot of times for myself. So, but you better have a bunch there. You're right, Melissa. You better have a bunch there because they're gonna rip, they're gonna tear. You can get stung through them. So, but I like to be able to feel it. And unlike you guys, usually our summers ain't but 80 degrees, so we're really not hot where you're sweating and dying out there, right? So
yeah,
I feel like you're rubbing it in with that comment. I don't know.
Maybe just a little bit.
I think so. Yeah.
I just unzip my hive and lick my fingers when I get stuff on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So does that mean you go out there without a veil on, JW?
I do at times, yes, sir.
Oh,
I'll tell you what, you're more of a man than me. There ain't no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I can't go near the hives without at least a veil on because they get stuck in my hair, and I cannot stand it when they get stuck in my hair, and I start doing like this crazy.
Well, I'm not
I
crazy.
start doing my own little waggle dance, and Tom's like, "What is your problem?" He's like, "I've never seen a beekeeper so afraid of bees." I'm like, "I'm not afraid of them. It's in my hair. I want it out of my hair."
Well, I know my hives, and I dress accordingly. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Spanky, you don't wear a bee suit, do you?
Do what?
Do you wear a bee suit? You don't wear a bee suit, right?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah,
Just
once you
a
mess
jacket
with,
or a veil or what?
I wear a whole suit. Once you mess with mean bees that cover your whole veil and you can't walk away from them, you'll learn.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, I got you.
yeah, that'd be a good lesson.
I pretty much, I mean, I'm wearing one right now because, you're getting into the bees for the first time for the season. They can be a little bit temperamental.
Mm-hmm.
But usually when we start doing inspections and stuff, I'm in a long sleeve t-shirt and jeans and a veil and some my dish gloves. And then when we pull supers, I'll be wearing a suit.
Yeah.
And then when the dearth hits in the fall, I'll wear a suit. Well, a jacket.
Yeah. Hey, I think Jonathan Bennett. I believe he's in Missouri, and I think he's in southern Missouri. He said he goes fully suited, but he took a full venom sac sting to his arm through a ventilated jacket last weekend. That's kind of Jonathan. That's kind of what Melissa was talking about, where she said that sometimes in the early spring they can be a little bit more defensive, probably because there's not much going on, And hit me back on the chat there, but I think you and I are friends on Facebook, and I think you're still in Missouri there, right? Texas County. You have to help me out with that. Where's Texas County? Give me a larger city, like down there by Corey. I'm not sure where Texas County's at.
I've actually been to Jonathan's house. He's bought one of my hives.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
so
he
was
bought
he
one
down
of
there?
them rotating hives.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's down there in southern Missouri. Then is that right, Ricky?
Yeah, I think he's in southern Missouri, if I'm not mistaken.
I thought so
think
too.
it's West Cape Girard over there, about 40, 50 miles, I think.
Okay.
There you go.
60 yards from Springfield to be
On the east.
Okay.
He's
He's further west.
Okay.
Okay.
60 miles from Springfield to the east.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've talked about it in the past. I forgot where he told me he was, but
Yeah, JW, you might be kind of along our way if we ever head kind of down south going to Florida and such. You might be along the way. I have to stop off sometime and visit with you for a minute on my way down or way back sometime.
I'm not as far south as you may think. I'm basically straight east, St. Louis.
Oh, you are?
Little south, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know why I was thinking you're further south.
No. My main farm is on Highway 50, straight across almost to Indiana.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Where you at? Wright City? You guys in Wright City?
No. You know where Six Flags is at, going out of St. Louis?
Oh, okay.
Off of 44. So 44 kind of heads mostly east-west, but it also has that north-south trajectory.
I've been to Marina Farms.
We're 2 miles from Purina Farms.
Yeah, I've been to Purina 1,000 times probably over the years.
Well, if you come to Prina, holler at me, and I'll make Melissa buy us lunch.
We'll go down to Hawthorne Inn and have some good steak.
That's right.
I'm coming with you, JW.
Hey, come on up. I'll buy everybody lunch.
That's where that
I might-
mushroom Swiss
I
burger
might
is.
even bring you a steak.
Heck yeah. I love steak.
I don't get out there like I used to because I'm trying to totally quit.
No, don't do that.
Well, hell, I'm only 80,
Oh, see, you got another 60 years left in you.
Yeah, you're still young. Those bee stings will make you last longer, JW.
That's
I
right.
know.
Yeah.
I may live forever then.
It's like a preservative.
Yeah, that's right.
That's good.
Well, guys, I'm going to call the chat right here tonight, and I appreciate everybody coming on. I appreciate the super chats. I'm going to tell you, you guys really embarrassed me tonight with that because it was an honor. Everybody that donated, it was a great honor tonight. You guys you blew me away tonight, and I didn't expect that at all. But we will pass that goodness along to somebody else, and we will get somebody a free horizontal hive with that. And look at that. I just cannot believe everybody that gave money tonight. That was crazy.
I know.
I didn't expect it. Speechless in some aspects of it. But it is an honor for you to, when everybody did that, I appreciate it. And I'm going to pass that goodness on. So thank you guys so much.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So we'll end it there, and we will see you guys next Thursday, and we will probably have a special speaker. So we'll talk to you guys then.
Good night, y'all.